Hi, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of the PETHS Alumni Network podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we are joined by Marcus G. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Nathan. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us on this lovely Saturday. It's amazing to have, I think, our first 2012 grad on the podcast. Yeah, first things first. So, like I said, you graduated in 2012. You then went on to AFM faculty, I guess, at Waterloo, which is accounting and financial management.
Yep.
So you did that. Coming out of school, you focused on accounting, consulting, and now you're working in governance, risk, and compliance. We'll call it GRC. And you progressed your way up at Instacart is where you're at right now. So I'm definitely curious to hear more about your experience at different companies, but also leading a team of the head of a very important division, right? So starting in high school, are there any key moments for you that stand out?
That's a really good question because my high school, I like to mentally divide it into two parts. One is grade 9 and 10, and the second one is 11 and 12. And I divide it because mentally, I didn't really feel like I was in high school until about halfway through. And then I realized, wow, there's like 2 years left. I really got to make something out of it. So, honestly, the first part, which is the first 2 years, is kind of like a blur because I didn't really have too many aspirations. I was kind of not that productive with my time, and like there were like these time sinks, like video games and things. The typical stuff that kids get into. Um, and then in the second half, it was like really dramatic. I had like this epiphany moment where I was like, man, I gotta like make good use of my time. And I think I joined like 20 clubs. I joined every single club there was available in PET. Um, like the track and field club, the debate club, like the anime club, the music club, the like just a whole bunch of clubs. And my time ended up becoming so filled up that I had to quit some of them. But yeah, like in those clubs, I kind of discovered my own passions outside of my career. You don't see it on like my LinkedIn or resume, but I was a really big fan of music. So I spent a big portion of my time playing music. I also danced. I was in the hip hop team. We did competitive competitions and like here and there, and we performed the talent show and things like that. And yeah, that was pretty much my high school life. Most of my friends were made later in the second half.
Yeah, I hear that quite a lot, right? First, like grade 9 and 10, you're just trying to figure things out, right? It's like it's a new scene for you, right? Like you're used to elementary school, go to high school, everything's different. You have a lot of freedom, right? And then by grade 11, 12, you start looking ahead and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm like halfway done. I need to start figuring out what I'm gonna do, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm glad. I think a lot of people have the experience, especially at PET, right? Where maybe
Oh
like
yeah.
grade 11 and 12, people are like, oh, I need to go. I need to apply to this program, that program. I need to pat my resume, things like that, right?
Yeah.
And I like how you talked about, your personal, endeavors in music, art, right? These are all things that I think keep us grounded, right? When things get stressful,
For
we
sure. Yeah.
enjoy doing these type of things, especially at a diverse school like PET. And I'm glad you mentioned the idea of diverse clubs, right? At PET, we have so many different opportunities to join, whatever club you like. So I think that's another plus for sure, right? So
Yeah.
you mentioned kind of grade 11, grade 12, you had that epiphany, right?
Yeah.
Starting to look ahead
Mhm.
towards your post-secondary endeavors, right?
Yeah.
Um, when did you kind of start, putting together the pieces for accounting and Waterloo? Was it Waterloo first and then accounting, or was it accounting and then Waterloo?
It was definitely accounting first. I had like this speaker come into my grade 11 accounting class, and I feel like at that time I was a little bit lost too in terms of like where I wanted to go. So when the speaker came in representing CP, or well, it was CAs back then. Now it's CPA, but they were talking about how this is an amazing designation to get. Like, the CEO of like NHL has it, the CEO of Sony has it, the CEO, like all these like huge companies, they have it. And like basically like, everybody just has it if they're successful. So I was like, I always wanted to get into business. I just didn't know where. So why don't I just get the CPA thing first and then we'll figure it out from there kind of thing. So
Right.
that's
Yeah.
how I ended up getting into accounting.
Yeah. So they say accounting is like the language of all business, right? and it sounds like you were in this accounting class, right? But did you consider like STEM? Like I know a lot of kids at PET, right? STEM is like a huge thing, right? Did
Yeah.
you consider STEM, and was there like kind of like a moment where you decided I want to do business? Like
It
before, yeah,
was
yeah.
it was in my grade 12 chemistry class when oh my God, I still remember his name. The teacher was Mr. Annett. I don't know if he's still
Mhm.
there,
Yeah.
but I was not doing well in the class, to put it lightly. And when I knew for sure that I was going to drop the class, I wrote on one of the midterms. I drew a picture of a penguin, and I begged him to give me nice marks because I drew a nice penguin. And spoiler alert, he didn't give me anything. So yeah, I dropped the class as usual, and I
Yeah.
think that was the closing the door on STEM for me.
Mhm. Yeah, I think like a lot of time at PET, right? It's such a STEM heavy school. And sometimes people feel the pressure to, I want to do STEM, I want to be a doctor, things like that.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you found, your passion in accounting, right? So as you applied to, universities, did you kind of make a list, or like how did you go about doing your research, and how did you end up eventually choosing Waterloo?
Yeah, so um I talked to my parents, and my dad was a huge fan of STEM, so maybe that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to do it. But I talked to, a whole bunch of people, and I ended up coming up with this list. And back then, I don't know how it is now. I'm sure it's similar, but I was deciding between, I think, like three or four schools, and they were all like business schools. I was this is probably not the first time you heard this, but I was applying for Rotman Commerce in UT. I was applying for Ivy, which I think you're
Yes,
in,
I am.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Mhm,
Western Ivy.
mhm.
I was applying for Waterloo AFM, and I was applying for, I think, McGill Business. So just like those, was there any more? Oh, Shoe Lake as well.
Mhm.
I applied for
Yeah.
Shoe Lake too. So of those, all my top priority was Waterloo AFM because they were the only ones that had like a very, very integrated course process to get the to get the CA back then. Like they had like their master's program, which let you skip capstones entirely to get there. So that's why I picked it in the end. Um, Not that I really had a choice, to be honest. I kind of got rejected from everything else, but I was happy I
Yeah.
got into Waterloo.
Yeah.
So
Did you go on any campus visits beforehand, or did you go completely sight unseen?
I went to Queen's Commerce.
Mm,
Oh, that was also one of
nice.
the schools I applied for. I
Mhm.
applied for Queen's Commerce. I checked that place out. I checked out Rotman. I didn't get I didn't go to Ivy. I didn't actually apply to Ivy, and the funniest thing, I couldn't even
Yeah.
I the reason was because I couldn't find Ivy in
Mm.
the university listing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Um, in any case, yeah, I went to some places, yeah.
Yeah.
I went to Waterloo too. It was the most depressing place, but it
Oh,
was
yeah. I hear that sometimes, but they also say it's like the MIT of Canada, right? It's like from what
man.
I imagine, it's very like innovative and like technology driven. I don't know.
That
Is that
first
an
word
accurate?
is very correct, yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's very sure. That's very correct because I think back then they had oh man, I forgot the name. I think it was called Waterloo Velocity. It was basically like this community of innovators where everyone was just trying to start their own business. And Waterloo, like, basically, like, mm, for lack of a better word, they kind of gave tons of resources to these people, guys that wanted to start businesses. And
Yeah.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
tons of businesses came out of Waterloo.
Was that something that you ever kind of dabbled in?
Not me, but I actually took a co-op job in Japan where I worked in Tokyo, and my coworker at that time was somebody who was the co-founder of a biotech company, I believe.
Wow. Very
I
cool.
think they were 3D printing like organs or something, and
Wow.
that company actually went pretty well. Like I think they had like a couple tens of thousands or a couple $100,000 with seed
Wow.
funding. So
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, he was
No.
a co-founder there.
Yeah. I'd love to hear more about the Japanese culture, right? It's very. I'm guessing it's like very hierarchical, right?
Like work culture?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I got used to it, like I've gotten to the point, well, I was super immersed when I lived in Japan. Like I tried not to use English at all. So the good news is I learned Japanese.
Very cool.
I I feel like I could still speak it today. But
Mhm.
the bad news is I never actually got a chance to go back. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean to answer your question, yes, it is quite hierarchical. Um, I'll tell you a story, for example. So,
Yes.
like, for instance, being late, as many people know, is like a taboo in Japan. And
Mhm.
I'm not talking like 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late. I'm talking like 2 minutes late or three
Yes.
minutes late. Um, we had these time cards that we had to come into work with, and in my time cards, you would see like every single day, it's like a beautiful 10 a.m., 10 a.m., 10 a.m., 10 a.m., 10 a.m. for like 20 days straight. But the one day you get like 10:02. 10:01 is still fine. I think my bosses were okay with that. But the moment you go into 10:02 or 10:03 territory, people look at you. They're like, "Oh, what's going on?" Like my boss would come up to me like, and he would say like, "Marcus-san, 大丈夫ですか?" And I'd be like, 大丈夫です. Like I would have to explain like why am I late for 3 minutes? So
Mhm.
yes, they're
Yeah,
very, very strict over there.
I saw like a news article where like their subway was late by like 50 seconds and it like threw everyone off, right? Like that degree of precision is crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like I
You
was
actually have
there,
to talk to
yeah,
the conductor and then get
yeah,
basically it's like a late slip. And then you
yeah.
bring that late slip to your employer and then they will forgive you for being late.
Yeah, I was there last year. Everything it's just crazy the amount of technology they have, like the systems they have, right? You won't see anyone walking like up the wrong like stairs, right? Like if there's a
Yeah.
divider on the stairs, everyone walks where they're supposed to, right? Really
Yeah.
crazy. No littering, anything like that. But yeah, like the way you address people is very like proper, right? There's like a certain way to address whoever you're talking to. But
Yeah.
And I guess like kind of relating these two things that AFM, like a lot of people choose it for like their co-op program, right? That's like a really strong point of Laurier and Waterloo, for
Yeah.
example. Did you find this position through the co-op or did you find it on your own?
This Japanese job I found through co-op.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it
So
was through
yeah,
Jobline.
So that's like a huge plus to Waterloo, right? Are there any other like
Yeah.
pluses? Like, what's another big plus of the AFM program?
Wow. Lifelong friends.
Hmm. Yeah,
uh, a fancy degree on the wall, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah.
No, I think honestly the really the biggest benefits of that I got from being specifically at Waterloo was for sure co-op. Co-op was one of the huge ones because like, being in AFM, the tuition was partially actually paid off by co-op. So I wouldn't have to rely on family as much or even loans. Another thing, I personally felt quite culturally connected to everybody at Waterloo. I being a Chinese person, I feel like I really, really got deeper, closely connected with my roots, which I wanted to. So that was a win-win for me.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I usually always ask, but you answer this question anyways. Is there a culture shock, going from Pet to Waterloo? But it seems like,
Not at
things are
all.
good there. No, no,
Not at all. I
that's
mean, I don't know about Pet now. I mean, back
yeah.
then it was lots of Chinese guys
Hmm.
and girls.
Yeah, so I guess fairly easy transition, things like that. It sounds like you said you made a lot of good friends, so that's another plus for sure. And then like
Yeah.
moving out after Waterloo, right? So you went into accounting, which makes sense, right? AFM to accounting. And then after that, you transitioned into consulting, right? Which is a little bit more, I would say, less quantitative and more qualitative, right? Like
Yeah.
what was kind of the story behind transitioning into consulting?
Um, actually, I wanted to say something
Yeah.
earlier, and I think this is gonna segue quite well into this question you asked.
Mhm.
But there's this quote I hear, and I like recite it in my head sometimes when
Yes.
I think about it. The quote goes like this. The quote goes like, um, "People live two lives." You might have heard this. People live
Mhm.
two lives, and the second one begins when they realize they only have one.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that kind of became like the impetus for a lot of things in my life. Like, we're talking about how I split my high school into stage one and stage two. Like, that's the reason. That's why I switched because I realized I didn't have much time. Consulting was the same, like I realized that going into accounting was sort of like a stopgap because at that time I needed a direction to go.
Right.
But I realized I couldn't be vague about it forever because it's like literally my life, right? Like I have to make a decision in something that I like. So consulting was kind of the closer direction that I wanted to take because I realized that I was pretty good at connecting to people. I was pretty good at communicating. I was pretty good at making friends and just doing presentations and those kind of things. I actually really enjoyed the human aspect of it. But you know, if you're sitting in a desk all day doing T-charts and balance sheets, there's not much of that. So that was my big switch. And I think and I think this is also a pretty pivotal point in my life. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about it. But I was sitting in this desk job where I was closed off in an office like the size of a bathroom.
Right.
And I'm not talking like a big bathroom. Like I was doing accounting for a small company and I was there for a year. And typically when I make decisions, I make them pretty quickly. I know some people talk about leaving their job and they stay there for a long time, but I like when I wanted to leave, I left in like a week or two. So I made the decision and I remember pacing back and forth in my tiny little office for 2 hours, literally pacing back and forth, thinking about how I should resign to my boss. And you know, it was difficult, but when I got past the point of no return, which is literally stepping into his office, I felt relief. And I told him, you know, hey, you know, like I thank you for everything you taught me. I learned such invaluable experience here. But I want to go another direction. I want to go into consulting.
Right.
And you know, he tried to keep me, but I wanted to go, so I left. And then I went to British Columbia. That was my next destination. So ever since then, yeah, I've just pretty much been in a very human-oriented career path. Even here at GRC, when I'm at Instacart, like it's very, very people-oriented, and I think that's really where I wanted to take my career. So never look back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I guess like typically people think of accountants as, you know, people who like file taxes, like you said, just work on T accounts, right?
Yeah.
But I guess in some aspects, you know, it is a little bit true, right? And I like how you touched on, you know, the people aspect, right? Of people don't necessarily realize, you know, the people aspect is super important in like any profession, and people who excel with people are often better off, you know, doing consulting, things like that. Something that I've learned while in business school. Yeah. So how did you end up in British Columbia, right? Because you mentioned you went to Japan, came back to Waterloo, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like you enjoy, you know, working all over the place. How did you end up in BC?
That last statement is so true. I do love working all over the place. I think back then I really enjoyed change. So I took a job offer for a consulting firm in Prince George, BC. And they were super kind to me, super, super nice to me. Like they paid for my flight, they paid for my accommodations. They gave me a big welcome into what is actually a pretty small town in British Columbia. Like I'd be surprised if anybody knows it. But yeah, like that was a consulting job that I stayed at for just under a year. And yeah, that's basically how I went. Like I took a job and I went far away with it. They, you know, it was the big first leap. You know, we call it leaps of faith, right? Because you really don't know what to expect when you travel long distances away from family and friends.
Yeah.
But I kind of thought about it as like a hyperbolic time chamber kind of thing. You know, like I'm gonna disappear from my friends and my family. No one's gonna see me for a year or two, and when I come back, I'm gonna be such an upgraded individual with skill sets and maturity that I'm gonna outperform everybody that stayed and didn't travel. That's kind of my mindset at the time.
Yeah. So at the very beginning, you mentioned, you know, that not just embracing change, but like seeking out change, right? And you know, naturally as humans, we don't really like change, right? Do you have any advice, you know, for people who are a little bit, you know, resistant to change?
I think for the people that don't, or for the people that find it difficult to make change, think back to all the times in your life when you did actually take the step, when you did actually make change, and then look back on your mind at that time. Did you regret it? Probably not, right? Like there's whenever people make the change, it's more so the first step that's the hardest, but you have to just keep reminding yourself that you're probably not going to regret it.
Mhm.
And like, I don't know, like right these days, actually, very, very recently, I've been adopting a mindset where I try to make decisions based on whether the future me will regret it or not.
Mhm.
And I think, okay, if the future me 10 minutes from now, after making this decision, isn't going to regret it, then I'm just going to do it,
Right.
you know?
That's great advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just do things in life that you won't regret, and you'll end up living a life that you really loved. That's
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
my thought.
Living with no regrets. I fully, resonate with that. I think that's great advice for people considering, like their academic path, their professional path, their personal path, whatever it is. And speaking of the no regrets kind of attitude, was consulting everything that you thought it would be when you went over to Prince George?
In the people aspect, yes. Like I got such great opportunities to connect with various different kinds of people. And as you know, like growing up in Pet and then going to Waterloo, you kind of box yourself off culturally speaking, right? So it's super important, especially for us to live in Canada, that to understand it's a super multicultural country. Like you can't stay in that box forever, and you shouldn't stay in that box. So yeah, learning how to communicate with many different kinds of people, it really builds a maturity that I expected. I thought it was great. Some other parts of consulting that I didn't so much enjoy, I guess. I thought I would really enjoy traveling.
Mhm.
The truth is, traveling gets boring real quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you're on a plane all the time, you start to wish that you weren't on a plane. But
Mhm.
the grass is always greener, so
Right.
it's just human nature, I'd say.
So you touched on before that you were there for just under a year, right? Then you
Yeah,
moved on to your next role. And this
yeah.
was also a consulting gig, right?
In Vancouver, yeah.
It was okay, so you moved to Vancouver, right? And I'm assuming it's going to be a lot different working in like big city versus Prince George, right?
Yeah, Vancouver was an experience. It's a big difference, big city and small city. But I think it coincided with a point in my life that was a dip, actually. At that time, I signed up for what I thought was a great opportunity. And then 2 months later, I lost my job. I was let go from
Mhm.
uh, that full-time role. And at the same time, I was dumped by my girlfriend. So they were, and both of these were like 1 day apart. So it
Wow.
literally happened at the same time.
Wow.
I would say at that point in my life was definitely one of the, probably even today, to today is probably the biggest dip,
Mhm.
just because of how the timing of everything worked. I found
Right.
myself waking up one day in Vancouver thinking like, what am I even doing here? Like, I don't have a, I don't have family, friends, job. I don't even have a girlfriend here. Like,
Mhm.
what am I even doing in this city?
Right. Mhm.
Um, so, I would say like much like every superhero movie, there's always like a down point in the movie, like
Right.
something bad happens, and I guess it really is about how you pick yourself back up after the bad things that happen. So yeah, for me, I think it really was indispensable for what happened later on. Like the lessons that I learned and the maturity that I got, it was 100% the reason why I am where I am today. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. I like how you liken it to like a movie, right? At every point there's like that, it's like it builds, it builds, it builds, and then you reach that point of conflict, right?
yeah. It's like
And
raining, someone's in a
yeah,
dark alley, he's
yeah,
got his hand in his head, like, it's
yeah,
like that scene in the movie, you know what
yeah.
I'm
And then I
saying?
guess at the end of the movie, the hero, figures it out, learns from that experience, which you touched on is very important, to learn from your experiences, take lessons from it, come out the other side with a different perspective, and hopefully reach, that happy ending at the end of the movie that everyone loves, right? So I
Yeah,
think, yeah, everyone probably goes through, downturns in their life. It can be anything like health related, family related, anything like that, right?
100%. Yeah.
But it's important to take those lessons out of it, right?
Yeah.
Those, I guess,
Triumph is the big part.
yeah.
Triumph is the word triumph. I'm a huge fan of it because like not many things in life make me emotional. But seeing people triumph,
Mhm.
like people who go through tough situations. Not even me. Like if I watch somebody else who goes through like terrible situations and they somehow muster up like the mental strength and the courage to move forward and then they succeed is like triumph is
Yeah.
one of the big reasons why people live. I think it's just a
Yeah.
great feeling. So
Yeah. It's why
I
people
like
cry
that word.
during movies, right?
I
Like,
I personally cry during triumph scenes. Like
yeah.
I don't know about you, like
Yeah.
I say this to my friends too, like like romance movies, it's
Yeah.
okay. Like I don't really cry. Triumph though, like watching, I don't know, like let's say like an athlete lose his big competition and then he like
Mhm.
breaks his leg and then he
Yeah.
goes through rehabilitation and then he wins the championship the next year. Like that would make
Right.
me cry.
Well, I would argue that romance movies do have a degree of triumph because there is like that like dip, right? So
That's
it
true.
just depends on how you look at it, right? Like,
That's true.
yeah, those different kinds of triumph, right? I think triumph is like
Yeah.
an overarching term, but yeah, romance movies, those definitely have like a character arc, right? Where they
Character
lose
arc.
something or someone, they come back strong, right? So I think that's
Doesn't make me cry though.
no, no, yeah. So I think yeah, that's definitely an important learning point that might be the title of this video. Not sure yet, but yeah, triumph
Okay.
is a huge thing. Because like I
I
said,
like it.
everyone's gonna go through or everyone's gonna go through dips at one point, but it's like whether they decide to get back up after those dips, right?
Yeah.
So
It's a
you
famous Japanese proverb. I think it goes like fall down 7 times, get up 8.
so continuing your story, you're in Vancouver, you kind of have like another epiphany, revelation. Where do you go from there? Like what are some tips to help people, reach that triumph that, we've been talking about?
I would say for anybody that goes through difficulty, I think one of the first things, because as I go through life, I realize that lots of people handle difficulty differently. Like, and in my opinion, I wouldn't think that all of them are great. Like, there are some ways to handle difficulty better. But I think all of them coincide and they converge at one point, which is you have to face it. And I know this is like this might sound super obvious. It's like, oh, you just have to face your difficulties. But the truth is a lot of people don't. Like
Mhm.
they might put it off, and that's fine. That's just human nature. Like you don't want to think about the difficult things. You don't want to admit that you're wrong in certain parts of life. But I think the growth only starts when you realize that, right? And I think
Right.
for anybody that's going through difficulty, you know, first of all, you have to realize that you're human. People make mistakes, and that's nothing bad. It doesn't take away from your character.
Mhm.
It doesn't take away from your arc.
Right.
Like it's really just humanizing yourself. Like I had a problem with putting high expectations on myself. So realizing that sometimes you have to fall down 7 times to get up 8
Mhm.
is one of the biggest reasons why I think I was able to grow from that. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think so. To answer your question, I think facing difficulty, is one of the is the first big thing that people have to do.
Right. Mhm. Couldn't have
Yeah.
said it any better myself. I totally agree with that 100%, 110%. So as it relates to like actionable steps, right? When you're in Vancouver, after that you moved back to Toronto, right? Um,
Yeah.
and you moved over to GRC, right? After doing
Mhm.
consulting for a while. How did you kind of navigate that transition between industries and location?
Yeah, so I would say if I had a superpower in my professional career, I would say it's the ability to connect to people. I I know well, I learned later on that this is probably not as common as I thought it was, but people hiring you into full-on technical medium level roles without any experience is actually pretty rare. But I found myself on the receiving end of that many, many times. Like my job in Vancouver was fully flushed out data scientist. And how I got into GRC was the same. Like I was hired into a full on GRC role. And the reason why I got both was just because I got along with the recruiter. Like I got along with the CEO, I got along with the hiring manager. Like we would talk about things, and I think that's another big part of career is, at least for me, I think humanizing the person sitting across from you is so much more important, at least like in an interview scenario, as opposed to like showing them how skilled you are, showing them how dependable you are, showing them how smart you are. Like I think at least that's how I got my opportunities in life. Like for this GRC job, I hopped into a 30-minute call with the CEO of the company, and that turned into like a 2.5 hour call. And then the next day he hired me. Like it's just how it is, you know. Like and then that's how I got into JRC. You know, like it
Mhm.
wasn't because I wanted to. I just happened to have certain doors open for me that led me that way.
Yeah, I think that's something that we don't necessarily learn in school enough, right? Like we have math class, but we don't have like social presentation skills. You can take them in university, but I think especially in high school, there's not like a strong emphasis on communication skills, interpersonal skills, right?
Yeah.
And for those of us that are watching, and we might be thinking, oh, I'm generally, not that good with people. Do you think that being good with people is something you're innately born with, or do you think it's
Oh,
something that you can learn?
I got the perfect answer for this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I actually was terrible with people. I was super shy. I mean, I'm still super shy, but um, I was really, really bad at interviews. I would bomb every single one. Like my first co-op job at Waterloo, like I couldn't even find a job. So the university had to make up a job for me working for the university. Like that's how bad I was at communicating with people. Um, but I don't know. I guess it's just like the theme of the day. I went through an epiphany, and this particular epiphany, this is gonna sound crazy, but it transformed me overnight into somebody who became or somebody who was a great communicator. Like this just was one epiphany completely changed the way that I talk to people, and it made me suddenly go from zero to hero in a way.
Mhm.
So you're probably wondering what that epiphany is. So
Yeah. Mhm.
I'll tell you. Like
Yeah.
it was a YouTube video actually. It was a YouTube video I found. I think one morning I was just I oddly woke up at like 8 a.m. and I don't know. I had no reason why I would wake up that early. I usually don't. But I was just flipping through YouTube videos until I found this public speaker. And I won't give the name of the public speaker because he's a little bit controversial.
Okay.
But but
Yeah.
but he would talk publicly to people in a way that commanded respect. And what what drove me further into this person was not the topics that he was discussing, but rather how he was talking about it.
Mhm.
And what I ended up doing, I went on like this binge. I watched like 6 hours of his videos, and then from that moment on, I basically just mimicked his tone. I mimicked his hand gestures. I mimicked his voice inflections, like the way he used certain words. I basically just copied this guy,
Mhm.
and then I used it in my next interview. And then my next interview actually happened to be the one that brought me to Prince George in BC,
Mhm.
my first BC job.
Mhm.
And I scored that interview so well that my recruiter on the other end, which was the boss of the company, he's like, "Well, you're obviously very, very well spoken." And
Mhm.
I heard
Yeah.
this I was like, "Really? I am? Like this is
Yeah.
crazy."
Mhm.
Like so basically, so long story short, the reason why I became good at talking when I originally was terrible at talking was I just basically copied another person that I thought was a good speaker.
Mhm.
And then over time, of course, I wasn't just constantly copying him. I kind of mixed in a little bit of my own uh, flavor, like my
Right.
own personality into the way that I spoke, and that made
Mhm.
it more natural. That made it more me,
Yeah.
and I basically just kept running with it. I think
Yeah.
speaking is actually a skill you train.
Yeah.
I don't think it's something you're born with. I don't think there's good speakers and there's bad speakers. It's really just good speakers and good speakers in the future.
Right. Yeah. I
Um,
think, yeah, a lot of people do DECA in high school to practice their speaking. And I think what you mentioned is great, right? You mimic someone else, because there are people who are very good at speaking, right? Salespeople,
totally.
leaders of companies, very good at speaking, conveying their ideas, developing rapport between, themselves and others.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned adding your own, personality into it, because I think a lot of time that's what recruiters are looking for, right? They don't want to hear like a robot all the time, right? So
Oh yeah.
I think definitely something that you use every day, right? We're in an interconnected world. You talk with so many people, different facets of your life, like personal relationships, professional relationships, things like that, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that leads into my next question, right? As you've moved up at this company, you, I'm you've assumed more of a leadership role, right? And
That's right.
I'm gonna guess that your ability to communicate with others is really important when you're leading other people, right?
Yeah,
How has it
100%.
been? How has it been, leading more people? Like, what are some, key takeaways for you?
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, so just as you surmised, I basically got into this job, which was already sort of like a people manager. I was hired as the business manager of the inside sales team. So the inside sales we're referring to, they're not actually selling to anybody. They're more so managing people that are already customers of our business. So I was managing that team. And then I guess as I got more skilled, I was promoted into something more like middle management, where I was like the manager of a manager. And then from that point on, because I was so good at GRC at the time, they just made me the head of the whole department. So that's how I kind of got into it. Like, okay, so this is for like the managers out there. Like if you are out there managing a team, if you're out there hoping to become a manager in the future, I don't know for whoever is watching, but management of people is such a drastically different skill than whatever you were before. Like you have to kind of really, really start from scratch. Hmm. I would say an actionable skill you can do immediately is you build something with each person in your team. And I'm not talking something that's like boring. I'm talking something deep with each person. Like for example, like if I have like a one-on-one chat with one person on my team, I would try to find out something about him or her that is, important to them, and then I would use that as the starting point for each of my team members. I would treat each team member as my goal is to connect with them as deeply as possible, to understand their pains, to understand their joys, and that way they can feel better about communicating with me.
Mhm.
One of the things I realized that I really actually really hated was when I was not a manager, I knew people that were maybe friends or coworkers that would say things about their manager that the manager doesn't even hear.
Yeah.
And I realized that when I became manager, I did not want that to happen. I wanted
Mhm.
things to be as transparent as possible. Like if there was some disagreement, which there always are, which there always is, then I want them to feel comfortable enough to talk to me about it.
Right.
So I think building a deep connection with the members of my team is more important than anything for me if
Mhm.
as a manager role.
Yeah. I can think back to sometimes where I'd be at a job and a manager would kind of ask like a somewhat personal question, and I'd kind of be like taken off guard, right? Like I'm like, why is my boss asking me this question? But now I realize it's to, build rapport, build that trust,
Yeah.
build that like sense of community, right? Which is
I hope it
something
wasn't too awkward when he asked
no, no, no. Well,
that.
I was just a little bit taken aback at first because I was like, he's never asked me that before. But then the more I learn about, organizational behavior and leadership, the more I realize it was, just me like making it awkward because I know his intention was probably, to build better team, right? Things like that.
Yeah.
And with GRC right now, governance, risk, and compliance, we're living in, I would call it a crazy world right now, right? With like political structures, geopolitical conflicts, things like that, right? Has that affected what you do?
I'll say my day-to-day job, not at all. I think
No.
like there's always issues going on in the world, and back then when I started versus now, like there's always something making the breaking
Right.
news. But
Mm-hmm.
the thing that I would say was the bigger challenge was um, I think right now, especially now, the human aspect is getting more and more important because like I'm not the first to say this, but obviously AI is a huge
Yeah.
factor, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
this has gotten to the point where I think very, 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 very soon, and I'm like I mean in the very near future, like AI can get to a point where technical skills almost becomes a moot point. Like
Mhm.
you could be an insanely technical person, but if you don't have that creativity or that, we'll call it a human element,
Mhm.
right? That encompasses communication skills, people management skills, like creativity, conflict resolution, like those things all become double, triple,
Right.
quintuple more important.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
like for whatever facet of job anybody in the future is taking, like you should really look into what is the human aspect of your job. If you're an accountant or if you're a lawyer or if you're a doctor or if you're just an analyst, look into what is the human aspect of your job and your position and home in on that, because the more you focus on technical, like trust me, that technical is like someone else is taking that job and is not
Right.
going to be a human, like
Right.
in the very near future. So
Mhm. Yeah, it's been a pretty common theme, right? The applications of AI throughout, every industry, right? It affects every sector really. And yeah, that's been a kind of common sentiment that you should focus on skills that I would call never go out of style. Like
yeah, yeah,
being a good human, never go out of style. You're gonna always need it, for
yeah.
whatever it is. And in terms of looking forward to the future, you mentioned, being a good communicator, being a good leader, being a good manager, things like that. Do you have any other future aspirations that we can look forward to seeing from you?
Okay, honestly, this is just me being honest. Okay, I've gotten to a point in my professional career where I am not sure if I want to go any further,
Mhm.
because everything from like the quality of my work-life balance, obviously competition is a huge part. Like all of those things, like gotten to a point where I'm like pretty comfortable with it. Like I don't think I need any more. And I think people naturally get a feel for what they need in life. Like obviously making $1 million is great,
Yeah.
but with it comes certain trade-offs. And as people get older, I think people realize certain things that are indispensably important. Like to me, like family is important, love is important, like your own hobbies is important. The things that you do and you love is super, super important. So for my point at, in my professional career, I believe I've hit a point where if I were to put any more effort into my career, I think other things in my life will suffer.
Right.
And maybe I will continue to climb, and maybe I will eventually do something that is, like a higher career aspiration. But at this current point in time, I would say just be happy.
Yeah.
Honest,
Yeah.
like I think my future goal is just to be happy.
Yeah.
I want to be like satisfied with every aspect of my life. I want to be satisfied in like my ability to help others. I want to be satisfied in my ability to um, love my family and my friends. Like though I think that part probably not the answer that you thought you were gonna get, but
Mm,
it's definitely one of my big
yeah.
things for this year.
No, I'd say that's definitely a very humble and self-aware answer. And as I've interviewed many people on this podcast, I find that the older, or I'll call them more experienced alumni,
Just say older. Just
the
call
the
me
older,
the
the
oldest
older
uncle of this
alumni
podcast.
have a little bit more perspective in terms of having a little bit more to look back on and being a little bit more proud of how far they've come. Whereas like people like my age, they're just starting out in the workforce and it's always what's next, right? Like it's always go, go, go for them.
Yeah.
So it's nice to have a different perspective where, we can look back and say, I've worked hard for this. I'm happy with where I am. And like you said, it's a trade-off, right? At the end of the day, life is about a bunch of trade-offs, right?
You know what?
So
Listen, like that's great. Like you should do that. Like I mean, like hustle and grind and do
yeah,
whatever your heart takes you. Like I think for anybody that's around your age, I think that is exactly what you should be doing. And that's what I was doing too, by the
yeah,
way. Like I think like there's certain points in life where you do certain things and you should really cherish it. Like putting in the work, grinding is an amazing experience, especially the moment that you get rewarded. And of course, everybody gets rewarded. Everybody who grinds, everybody who hustles will get rewarded eventually. Um, I think that to honor the inner child in me, the guy who wanted to be like the president of or the prime minister of Canada, or the guy who wanted to be like a superhero, the guy who wanted to own a Fortune 500 company. Like I think to honor that child, I will continue to work and I will continue to do the best that I can. But also, I want to maybe if I could talk to that guy, I'd be like, hey, there's like some really important things in life too.
Right.
Like you're like your mom loves you, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like your parents love you, right? Like
Yeah.
there's certain things that like if there's anybody out there who's doing things to make their parents proud or make somebody proud or like you're doing things for something else, like for somebody else, like I won't speak for everybody, but for me myself, as I got older, I realized that actually to make my own parents proud, it wasn't that I had to be proud of myself or I had to get a specific job or make specific money or drive a specific car. At the end of the day, actually, to make my parents proud, I just needed to be happy.
Hmm.
And that's
Yep.
really all my parents wanted from me. So
Right.
like you talk about trade-offs, right? Like if I
Hmm.
became like let's say like if I were to start a company today, right?
Yeah.
And then I became CEO, I made, like X amount of money a year. Like the amount of time I can spend time with my family is like it gets less,
Right.
like you obviously can't spend as much time with your family if you're very, very busy in work. So I guess it was two things. My parents wanted to see me happy and my parents wanted to spend time with me.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think if I really wanted to make my parents proud, I should maximize the amount of time I can spend with them while also being happy at the same time.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, like
Mhm. Yeah.
I guess I should elaborate on that because it didn't really quite explain the reason why I got into accounting.
Mhm.
The reason why I got into accounting was partially because of that public speaker, but also because I wanted to make my family proud. Like I
Mhm.
wanted to become super successful. I wanted to be
Mhm.
rich. I wanted to be all this and that. And then as I got older, I realized to make them proud is really just all they really wanted was to spend more time with me and see me happy. So
Right. Yeah. That might be
yeah.
one of the deepest sections of any podcast I've had, which is, absolutely amazing. I think it's a very mature perspective to have that some of the older, I'll call them older alumni can really give. Something that, yeah, we definitely lose sight of when we're like, I'll say in your early 20s, everyone
Yeah.
just wants to, drive a Ferrari, live in a mansion, things
Yeah.
like that, right? But I think we really lose sight of what our parents do for us. That could be a whole other podcast that like you could talk hours about that, right? But understanding what they do for us, spending time with people we love. I think work-life balance is something that's becoming more and more normalized or popularized. Things that we talk a lot about it a lot more. People are more aware of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's very selfless and empathetic perspective that you have to not just be like you said, building a Fortune 500 company just to be rich, right? There's other things that there are to accomplish in life, and being able to look back and say I've made it and I'm happy with what I have, rather than I'll be happy when X. It's more I'm happy right now, right?
Though honestly, if you wanted to drive a Ferrari, like you do you, homie.
Yeah,
Like if you
yeah,
really wanted to drive a Ferrari and that's really your goal, that's really what keeps you going, then you should do it. Like
hmm,
at the same time, don't feel pressure from other people being like, "Oh, like why do you want to buy a Ferrari when you don't even own a home? Like why do you
yeah,
want to buy a Ferrari when you can just save money?" And like
yeah,
if you want to buy a Ferrari, just buy the Ferrari. Like
right,
just like or like lease a Ferrari,
yeah,
Because driving a Ferrari at 23 years old with your own money is a completely different feeling from driving a Ferrari at 50 years old with your own money.
yeah,
Like if you had a dream as a kid to drive a Ferrari and then you wait until you're 50 to accomplish that dream, it's just not the same feeling. Like you're not
hmm,
going to feel the same enjoyment out of driving a Ferrari when you're 50. However,
right,
when you're 23 driving a Ferrari around, sure, you're like down 20, 30K,
yeah,
whatever. But like when you're 50, you're going to realize that 20, 30K means nothing.
yeah. But
That
you also have
money,
more responsibilities, maybe. So and
yeah,
everyone runs their own race, right? So
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
yeah, when you're 23, you can afford to do, things like that if you have the cash. But maybe when you're 50, you have a family, that was more of a priority first, and then you get a Ferrari, right? So I think
Yeah,
I think everyone's a little bit different in that sense, right? 23, you're probably not going to have, a family to look after. or things like
Yeah.
that. But when you're 50, you might have checked off all the other boxes, and
Yeah.
then the wife says you can get a Ferrari. It might be one of those it might be one of those kind of situations. But yeah,
Yeah.
we'll wrap up. So you're the first 2012 grad we've had on the podcast. If you could nominate, another PEG grad, doesn't have to be 2012, but if you could nominate another PEG grad, who would it be?
Okay, I want to nominate my good friend David Fan. He was
Okay.
my dance. He was in my dance team and my dance partner. We hung out every single day in grade 12, and
Mhm.
he has he's leading his own interesting life, to which I won't rob him the joy of explaining. So I would like to nominate him.
Okay.
Yeah, please talk to
Awesome.
him and
Yeah.
listen to his life story and his experiences.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much for your time today and the recommendation. So, what I took away from our chat today is the idea, fall down 7 times, get up 8, right? And that kind of connection to the Japanese culture, I feel like, was something we didn't really like fully go into, but exploring different cultures, like you said, just taking that leap of faith, going, meeting different people, being good with people, mimicking other people, but adding your own, twist of personality, things like that. Um, Anything else that I missed?
Oh no, I liked
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I just want to hear you say the Japanese version. It's nana korobi ya oki.
Nana Krobi
Ya oki.
Yaoki.
Okay, let's say it together. On three. One, two, three. Nana
Nana
korobi
Krobi
ya
Oyus
oki.
Oki. Okay, wait. Nana Krobi Oi Oki.
Ya oki.
Nana Krobi
Ya
Ya
oki.
Oki.
I
All
hope I'm
right.
saying it right. I hope I'm
Nana
saying it right.
Nana Krobi Ya
Ya
Oki.
oki. Yeah.
Yeah, there we
There
go.
you go.
There we go. That
Fall
might be
down 7 times, get up 8.
that, yeah, that might be the intro for this video. I'm not sure yet. We'll see. But yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time and all your insights and talking about triumph, families, having goals, humility, being happy with where you are, what you have.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and we'll see everyone next week. Peace out.
Thanks, man. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah.